Paragraph 5. The Sashin are a nomadic group of about 300 people who live in the mountains and forests of northern Mongolia near the Russian border. After the reindeer cows have their calves, well, that doesn't sound like a follow-on to an introduction of the Sashin people. The Sashin people follow them on these migrations. Nope, that seems to follow something maybe about the reindeer. Some of these animals are tame. Nope, I'm not sure what animals they're talking about as of this sentence for the first follow-on. They are completely dependent on their reindeer herds for food. Well, that sounds like it might be the best follow-on sentence. Let's just check S. The most difficult part of the migration for the Sashin is the spring. Okay, I think Q is the best follow-on. They, referring to the Sashin, are completely dependent on their reindeer herds for food, clothing, and transportation. And we know they live in the mountains and forests, so they're probably separated from much of the developed world and depend on their reindeer herds. Let's look at the next follow-on sentence. And it could be, after the reindeer cows have their calves, the Sashin immediately begin to gather the milk from which they make cheese yogurt. That makes some sense in that they're using the reindeer for food, and they collect some of that food after the reindeer have babies, but it's not entirely clear that that's immediately following. The Sashin people follow them on these migrations, moving 6 to 8 times a year. That could refer to the reindeer. That could possibly be a better follow-on. They're completely dependent on their reindeer for food, and Sashin people follow them on these migrations. That seems to fit fairly nicely. And in fact, U, or S, the last sentence I was going to test for that second follow-on to Q, seems to fit actually quite well right behind T. The most difficult part of the migration for the Sashin is the spring. So this is an instance telling you some detail about the Sashin people follow them on these migrations in T. Now we see the most difficult part of that migration in S. So the migration connects the ideas of T to S, whereas the most difficult emphasizes one particular aspect of that migration from T. When the reindeer leave their wintering grounds and travel to the places where they give birth. Okay, here we have the idea of the reindeer giving birth and having calves. So that R that we checked for the second follow-on sentence before seems to fit fairly nicely as our fourth sentence after S. After the reindeer cows have their calves is a direct follow-up to migrating to the places where they gave birth. So after, which seems to follow, the reindeer calves give birth, cows have calves, the Sashin immediately gather the milk from which they made cheese, yogurt, and other dairy-based foods. And essentially, they collect the food from the first follow-on sentence idea. Some of these animals are tame. Oh, okay. U is the only sentence left, so you might presume it automatically goes into the fifth spot there. But that doesn't really make any sense there at the end, just to say some of the animals are tame, which is to say they're somewhat domesticated. Possible. It's a possible spot for them. I mean, R does indicate that they're gathering milk, making cheese, doing sort of a domesticated activity there with the reindeer. So some of them are tame. Another possibility, I suppose, would be, since T, S, and R seem to fit very tightly, and we're almost confident that those are together, given the connections, the migration to the migration, and then migration to birth to having calves. Those are clearly T, S, R is correct. So U is either at the end here, and it's not at the second one. We tried that already as the first follow-on sentence. So it could be in between Q and T. That's one other possibility. We've really narrowed it down to this one and our block of 3. So we just want to figure out what order. Does it become before the block, T, S, R, or does it come after? So let's look at it as though it were before. The Sashi are a nomadic group. They are completely dependent on their reindeer herds for food. Some of these animals are tame. The Sashi people follow them on these migrations. That seems to fit better, actually. I think that kind of puts U into place there. It refers to the fact that these animals is the reindeer herd, the pronoun, and the fact that they're tame or domesticated somewhat contrasts the fact that they then follow these animals on a migration. and then ultimately produce their food from them. So I think U is probably the best fit right in there, although it's not 100% clear in this case. A little tricky, but we'll go with this one.